Queen Jalira ruled the Cathari Empire with unmatched power and sharp intelligence. Her throne was feared across the galaxy, and her name alone could command respect or fear. She was proud, strong, and wise, yet no matter how many victories she won, there was one worry she could not conquer: her daughter, Lyra. Lyra was unlike any Cathari. She was gentle, shy, and often clumsy. She struggled with combat drills, faltered in diplomacy, and failed even the simplest intelligence tests. Every day, Jalira watched her daughter stumble, her heart torn between love and disappointment. In the court's eyes, Lyra was useless. Even Jalira could not deny it. And in the ruthless galaxy they lived in, weakness could mean destruction. But Jalira loved Lyra deeply. She could not bring herself to punish her for her failings. Instead, she searched for a solution, a way to protect her daughter while keeping the Empire strong. Then an idea came that seemed both daring and strange: a human husband. Humans were small, fragile, and unpredictable. They lacked the strength, longevity, and intelligence of the Cathari. Yet some humans had qualities the Cathari could never possess: courage, adaptability, and a unique kind of heart that could grow beyond expectation. Jalira called her daughter to her private chambers. Lyra entered, her head bowed and her steps hesitant. She knew her mother's voice could command armies, topple planets, and change destinies. "Mother, you wish to see me?" Lyra's voice was soft, almost trembling. "Yes, Lyra," Jalira said, her tone measured and serious. "I have made a decision for your future. You will marry a human named Marcus. He is from a distant planet, fragile in your eyes, perhaps in mine as well. But he possesses something you lack: a heart strong enough to endure, to grow, and to protect. Together you may survive where you alone would falter." Lyra's eyes widened, fear and confusion mingling in her gaze. "Mother, but I do not understand. Why a human? I am your daughter. Should I not be paired with a Cathari noble? Someone strong like the Empire demands?" Jalira shook her head gently, though her eyes were hard. "No, Lyra, strength alone will not save you. Intelligence alone will not protect you. I have seen the failures of perfect plans. Sometimes what the Empire needs is something unexpected. And you, my daughter, need someone to help you find the strength I fear you cannot discover alone." Lyra's lips trembled, but she said nothing more. She could not argue with the queen. The words of the ruler of the Cathari Empire were law, and law was absolute. The wedding was arranged swiftly. Marcus arrived in the capital, a nervous but polite human man, unfamiliar with the complex rituals and expectations of Cathari nobility. He was gentle, kind, and surprisingly calm in front of Jalira's intimidating presence. Lyra barely spoke to him at first, afraid and unsure how to respond to someone so different from her own kind. On the day of the ceremony, Jalira watched silently from her throne. Lyra stood beside Marcus, her hands trembling, her eyes flicking nervously toward her mother. Marcus looked equally nervous, unsure whether to bow, shake hands, or simply smile. Neither of them seemed prepared for the weight of what this union meant, not just for themselves, but for the entire Cathari Empire. Jalira's heart twisted. She had acted out of duty, not emotion, yet she could not help the flicker of hope inside her. Perhaps this human could help her daughter grow. Perhaps together, Lyra and Marcus could survive where she feared Lyra alone would fail. Still, the queen could not let herself relax. In her heart, she whispered a silent warning to the universe: "May the gods have mercy on us all." And with that, the ceremony began, binding two very different souls together in a marriage that none could yet understand and none could foresee the incredible consequences it would bring. Life after the wedding was harder than Lyra had ever imagined. The palace was not a home. It was a maze of rules, expectations, and constant judgment. Every corner seemed to whisper her failures. Every noble's gaze reminded her of her weaknesses. She stumbled through Cathari rituals, mispronounced sacred words, and often tripped during formal ceremonies. Marcus tried to help, but his human nature made him awkward in Cathari society. The nobles laughed behind their fans, calling him the fragile human and the handless husband. Lyra felt small, invisible, and often ashamed. At night, she would hide in her chamber, hugging herself tightly, wishing she could disappear. She knew her mother watched from afar, and she imagined the queen's cold disappointment with every mistake she made. Yet despite the fear, Lyra felt a strange relief in Marcus's presence. He never scolded her. He never demanded perfection. Instead, he smiled gently, offered quiet encouragement, and tried, sometimes clumsily, to learn Kithari ways for her sake. Jalira, the queen, observed them with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. She had expected chaos, maybe even disaster, yet she could not deny a strange spark. The human refused to break under pressure. Marcus fumbled, yes, but he never gave up. He asked questions, practiced rituals, learned the language, and tried again. Where Lyra failed and faltered, Marcus persisted. And slowly, very slowly, Lyra began to change. One evening, as the sun painted the palace towers gold, Lyra attempted a simple ceremony of respect toward her mother. Her movements were clumsy, her voice shaky. She knocked over a ceremonial vase, and the courtiers gasped. Marcus quickly steadied the vase with his hands. "It's okay, Lyra, we can fix this together," he said softly. His calm presence gave her courage. She straightened, took a deep breath, and completed the ritual without further mishap. Jalira's sharp eyes narrowed. She could see the subtle transformation, though she would not admit it. The human's persistence was teaching her daughter confidence, something Jalira had feared impossible. And yet a part of her rebelled. How could a fragile human teach a Kithari princess anything? How could she trust this strange creature with her daughter, with the Empire? Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Marcus learned the palace rules, adapted to alien etiquette, and even defended Lyra from subtle insults by the nobles. He did not fight with claws or energy blades. He used his mind, his reasoning, and most of all, his unwavering loyalty. Lyra watched him with awe, realizing that this human whom she had feared and misunderstood was more than he appeared. He was strong in ways she had never known existed. Lyra herself began to grow too. Encouraged by Marcus, she practiced her rituals daily, studied the history of her people, and tried to anticipate courtly challenges. She still made mistakes, but she no longer hid from them. Slowly, she began to smile more, laugh more, and even argue with confidence. Marcus was her anchor, her guide, and her friend in a world that often seemed cruel and unyielding. Yet Jalira could not fully accept it. Every day, she whispered in her private chambers, "This human cannot be enough. My daughter should be perfect. She should be strong." But each time she watched Marcus quietly help Lyra navigate a political discussion, negotiate with a stubborn noble, or simply comfort her after a failure, she felt an uneasy tension in her chest. Could it be possible that the human she had deemed weak was teaching her daughter, and maybe even her empire's strength? By the end of the first year of their marriage, one truth had become undeniable. Lyra was slowly transforming, not into a perfect Kithari, but into someone who mattered. Someone capable of surviving. And Marcus, the fragile human, was at the heart of it all. Jalira could not yet admit it. But the spark of hope had begun, and it burned brighter than she could have imagined. Years passed, and Lyra and Marcus had begun to find a rhythm in their life together. Lyra was no longer the timid, clumsy girl who had stumbled through the palace halls. She had grown confident, her voice carrying the firmness of someone learning to stand in her own power. Marcus, the human, had grown alongside her. He was still physically fragile compared to the Kithari, but his mind was sharp and his spirit unyielding. Together they were becoming something unexpected, a team that neither Jalira nor the court had imagined. Then the threat arrived. A rival empire, the Dravari, appeared on the edges of Kithari space. Their fleet was massive, bristling with weapons capable of leveling entire planets. They demanded tribute, threatening total destruction if their demands were not met. Panic swept through the palace like a wildfire. Generals argued with each other. Advisors whispered about surrender, plotting escape, or hiding the empire's most valuable secrets. Even Jalira, the mighty queen, felt her chest tighten with unease. She had faced many enemies, but this time fear gnawed at her resolve. Lyra's hands shook as she watched the council debate endlessly. Her heart raced, and she wished for Marcus's presence more than ever. She found him calmly reviewing star charts in a quiet chamber, his brow furrowed in concentration. Marcus had studied the enemy, their patterns, and their fleet movements. Unlike the Kithari generals, he did not panic. He analyzed, he calculated, he planned. "Lyra," he said softly, noticing her fear, "we can do this. We just need to act carefully and together." Jalira, observing from the council chamber, could hardly believe what she was seeing. A human, her daughter's human, was not cowering. He was not pleading for mercy. He was planning the defense of the empire, working alongside the generals who had dismissed him as weak. The queen's pride refused to admit it, but something inside her stirred. Could this fragile human really save them? Marcus presented a strategy that no Cathari genera had considered. He suggested using smaller, faster ships to create diversions while the main fleet remained hidden, striking only when the enemy was overextended. The generals scoffed at first. Humans did not have the strength, the weapons, or the experience. But Marcus persisted. He explained his plan patiently, answering every question, correcting every doubt. Slowly, the generals agreed to try it, hesitant but desperate. The attack began. Lyra stood at the command center with Marcus by her side, her fingers trembling as she monitored the fleet. The diversions worked perfectly. The enemy, confident in their numbers, rushed into traps they did not see coming. The Cathari ships struck with precision, coordinated and deadly, yet with minimal loss. The Dravari fleet faltered, confused and frustrated by tactics they could not anticipate. By the end of the day, the enemy retreated, humiliated and beaten. The Empire was safe. Lyra's hands were shaking, but this time from relief, not fear. She turned to Marcus, hugging him tightly, whispering, "I could never have done this without you." Shalira watched silently from her throne, her chest heavy with conflicting emotions. Pride, surprise, fear, perhaps all three. The human she had thought weak had done what her Cathari generals could not. He had protected the Empire, defended her daughter, and shown a courage Shalira had long dismissed as impossible. That night, Shalira walked alone through the palace gardens. The stars reflected on the water, calm and endless. She whispered into the night, a confession meant only for herself. I underestimated him. I underestimated them both. Her daughter and the human had changed the Empire forever, and for the first time she realized that strength did not always look the way she expected. Lyra and Marcus, unaware of the queen's inner turmoil, held hands and watched the twin moons rise. Lyra leaned against him and said softly, "We did it. Together." Marcus smiled, squeezing her hand. "Always together," he replied. Shalira's heart tightened, a mix of fear, regret, and awe. This human, this fragile creature, had not just survived. He had proven that even the weakest could shape the fate of worlds. And in that quiet moment, the queen began to see the impossible truth. Perhaps humans were not weak at all. Life after the battle with the Dravari brought a new sense of hope to Lyra and Marcus. The Empire had survived, but the experience had changed them both. Lyra was no longer timid. She carried herself with a quiet confidence. She still stumbled now and then, but her heart was stronger, braver, and filled with determination she had never known before. Marcus, too, had grown. Though he remained human and fragile in body, his mind had sharpened, his courage deepened, and his presence brought reassurance to those around him. Months later, Lyra discovered she was pregnant. The news surprised everyone in the court, especially Shalira. At first, the queen felt a flicker of worry. Would the child be strong enough? Would it survive in the Cathari world? Would her daughter, whom she had long thought useless, be able to care for it? But as she watched Lyra's gentle smile, the warmth in her eyes, she began to see a different kind of strength emerging. Not one taught in schools or proven on battlefields, but the quiet, enduring strength of love, care, and resilience. When the children were born, twins, a boy and a girl, the palace erupted with curiosity and awe. They were beautiful, a perfect blend of Cathari elegance and human vitality. Their skin shimmered faintly under the palace lights, their eyes bright with intelligence, and their tiny hands grasped instinctively, as if sensing the importance of life around them. Marcus cradled them gently, whispering words of love and promise, while Lyra's tears of joy fell freely. In that moment she realized that her life, once filled with fear and failure, had become something extraordinary. Shalira observed from afar, her pride struggling against disbelief. She had married her useless daughter to a human man, expecting weakness and failure. Yet here were the twins, proof that strength came in unexpected forms. Marcus had not only survived the scrutiny of the Cathari court, but had nurtured Lyra into a mother capable of raising children who could one day lead the Empire. The queen's heart tightened with a mix of admiration and fear. Admiration for what Marcus had achieved, and fear that she had misjudged what true power really was. Lyra, holding her children for the first time, felt a surge of purpose. She whispered to Marcus, "I never knew I could feel this strong, this needed." You've taught me more than anyone else ever could. Marcus smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You were always capable, Lyra. I only helped you see it. His words filled her with warmth, a comfort she had never expected from anyone, least of all a human. The children grew quickly, displaying qualities both alien and human. They learned languages at an astonishing rate, played with energy and curiosity, and demonstrated bravery that startled even the most experienced Kithari warriors. Lyra guided them patiently, and Marcus encouraged them with love and gentle wisdom. Together, they were shaping a new generation, one that could unite two worlds and change the future of the Empire forever. Jalira, once a queen who ruled with absolute control, began to see the truth. Power was not only in strength or intellect, it was in persistence, in love, in the courage to try and fail and try again. She realized that Marcus's human resilience had shown her daughter a path she herself could not have provided. Lyra had flourished because someone believed in her when even her mother had doubted her. For the first time, Jalira approached Lyra without cold calculation. She placed a hand gently on her daughter's shoulder and whispered, You are stronger than I ever imagined." Lyra looked up, eyes glistening, and said softly, "I only became strong because someone showed me how to stand. Mother." The queen nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. That night, as the twins slept peacefully in their cradles, Marcus and Lyra stood together on the balcony, gazing at the stars. Lyra rested her head on his shoulder and said, "We did it. We survived." Marcus held her close. "No, Lyra, we thrived, together." And far below, hidden in the shadows of the palace corridors, Jalira realized that the marriage she had doubted, the human she had dismissed, and the daughter she had feared would fail had all become the true strength of her empire, strength she could no longer ignore. Years passed, and the Kithari Empire flourished in ways Queen Jalira had never expected. The once useless Lyra had grown into a confident leader, and Marcus, the fragile human, had become a trusted advisor and protector of the empire. Their children, brilliant and strong, had begun to show talents that blended Kithari skill with human ingenuity. The empire was thriving, yet Jalira's heart was heavy with a new feeling she could not ignore. Regret. Regret for what? She could not say at first. For her harsh judgment of her daughter, for underestimating the human beside her, for not seeing sooner the power of love and loyalty that now held her family together. Every time she watched Lyra and Marcus work together, solving disputes, planning defenses, nurturing their children, she felt a sharp ache in her chest. They were strong, capable, wise, and yet none of it was because of her. The queen remembered the day she had arranged their marriage. She had done it out of duty, out of fear for the empire, believing that Marcus could somehow fix her daughter. She had dismissed him, laughed at his fragility, and expected failure. She had imagined scandal, embarrassment, or disaster. She had not imagined this. Lyra smiling, confident, radiant. Marcus calm, clever, unshakable, and their children inspiring loyalty and hope across the empire. Jalira walked through the palace corridors one evening, observing quietly as Lyra counseled her children, and Marcus guided generals in strategy. The humans' ideas were practical, clever, and unorthodox, yet they worked every time. Even Jalira could not dispute the results. She had underestimated him, and it had humbled her in ways she never anticipated. Her chest tightened as she realized the full truth. Marcus had done more for the empire than any Kithari warrior, scholar, or noble could. He had shown courage when others faltered. He had taught Lyra to believe in herself. He had brought together strength and love, creating a new legacy that the queen had almost destroyed through her pride and doubt. One night, alone in her private chambers, Jalira stared at the stars and whispered, "I was wrong. All those years, I thought I knew what strength was, but I was blind. Weakness is not always what it seems, and strength does not always look like power." Her hands trembled as she spoke. She thought of Lyra's laughter, Marcus's steady presence, and the children's bright eyes. "I almost destroyed what I feared would fail, and yet, they have built what I could not." The queen's regret was sharp, but it was also a lesson she could not forget. She realized that love, trust, and persistence often outweighed skill, perfection, and raw power. Humans, she now understood, were not weak. They were different, resilient in ways her people had never mastered. And Marcus, this human who had entered her life awkwardly, timidly, had changed everything. The next day, Jalira summoned Lyra. She took her daughter's hands gently, something she had rarely done. "Lyra," she said softly, her voice shaking, I see now that you are not useless. You are stronger than I ever imagined. And Marcus, he has done what I could not foresee. You two, together, you have saved more than the Empire. You have saved me, from my own pride." Lyra's eyes filled with tears and she embraced her mother. "Mother, it was Nevi. Or about saving you. Marcus and I, we just tried to be our best together. I never imagined it would matter to the Empire like this." Jalira held her daughter tightly, letting the tears fall freely. The weight of years of doubt, fear, and pride melted in that embrace. For the first time, she admitted to herself that she had been wrong, but she also felt a strange relief. Regret, while bitter, had taught her humility. And humility, she realized, was a kind of power all its own. From that day forward, Jalira's perspective changed. She began to support Lyra openly, listen to Marcus's advice, and value love as much as strength. The queen who had once doubted and feared her daughter's union now watched in awe as her family became the heart of the Empire. She had been wrong, yes, but in her regret she found a new understanding of what true power and legacy really meant. After years of struggle, Lyra and Marcus had grown into a remarkable team. Together they had transformed Lyra from a timid, unsure girl into a confident, capable woman. Marcus, once the fragile human outsider, had become a pillar of strength, admired for his wisdom, patience, and courage. Their union, once doubted by everyone, including Queen Jalira, was now the cornerstone of the Cathari Empire's success. The Empire itself began to change. Where once Cathari tradition had demanded strict hierarchy and perfection, Lyra and Marcus introduced new ideas. The children of mixed human and Cathari heritage were welcomed into the court as symbols of hope. Marcus taught innovation, problem-solving, and empathy. Lyra combined her natural Cathari intelligence with lessons learned from him, creating strategies and policies that strengthened the Empire in ways Jalira had never imagined. Jalira watched all of this with a mixture of awe and lingering regret. She had once judged Marcus and Lyra harshly, believing them weak and unworthy. Now she saw their strength not as a threat but as a revelation. Humans were fragile in body, yes, but resilient in spirit. Love, determination, and courage could shape destinies, perhaps even more than the raw power of the Cathari. One afternoon, Jalira walked quietly through the palace halls and found Marcus advising Lyra's children on a simulation of a fleet maneuver. The twins, energetic and curious, listened intently, asking questions and testing ideas. Marcus encouraged them patiently, smiling at every correct answer and gently guiding them when they faltered. Lyra observed, her pride in her family clear in her eyes. She caught Jalira's gaze and nodded slightly, silently inviting her to see what they had built together. For the first time, Jalira stepped forward without fear or judgment. She approached Marcus and Lyra and said, I have been blind. I judged too quickly. I underestimated both of you, and I see now that my pride almost cost me the chance to witness this greatness." Lyra reached for her mother's hand, and Marcus bowed his head respectfully, not needing words to convey understanding. The queen realized that her empire was thriving because she had learned humility, not because she had ruled with absolute control. The lessons of the human, his persistence, empathy, and courage had shown her a new way to lead, a new way to value people for who they truly were, rather than for what she expected them to be. She began to listen more, to observe without judgment, and to seek wisdom from unexpected sources. Lyra and Marcus had not only saved the Empire once, they had created a future where it could flourish beyond imagination. They encouraged cooperation between species, introduced new technologies, and nurtured the children to become leaders who would carry both human ingenuity and Cathari excellence. Their influence spread quietly but powerfully, touching every part of the Empire. That night, Jalira stood on her balcony, watching the twin moons reflect on the palace gardens. Lyra and Marcus were nearby, laughing softly as the twins played. The queen felt a deep peace unlike anything she had known in decades of ruling. She realized that her regret had been transformed into understanding. Strength was not always obvious, and power was not always visible. True greatness often came from the quiet, patient work of love, loyalty, and persistence. Jalira whispered to herself, I see now. Humans, Lyra, Marcus. They have shown me what I could not see before. Strength comes in many forms, and courage is sometimes hidden in the most fragile bodies. She smiled faintly, feeling a warmth she had rarely experienced. The Empire was no longer hers alone, it was a shared vision, nurtured by those she had once doubted. In that quiet moment, Jalira understood the depth of her daughter's growth, the impact of Marcus's presence, and the true meaning of legacy. The queen who had once ruled with iron control now ruled with respect, wisdom, and humility. She knew that the Empire's future was brighter than she had ever imagined, not because of her alone, but because of the love and strength she had learned to see in others. And for the first time, Jalira felt hope not as a distant dream, but as a living, breathing reality. Growing stronger with each passing day, years had passed, and the Kithari Empire was stronger than ever. Lyra and Marcus had become the heart of it, a partnership that combined courage, intelligence, and compassion. Their children, now growing into capable young leaders, embodied the best of both species. Where once Jalira had feared weakness, she now saw strength in ways she had never imagined. The Empire thrived and peace stretched across star systems, a testament to the power of love, unity, and perseverance. Jalira sat in her private chambers, watching her grandchildren practice with miniature fleets, simulating battles and learning strategy from Marcus. Lyra laughed as she corrected their mistakes, her voice steady, confident, and filled with warmth. Marcus guided them patiently, always calm, always encouraging. The queen's chest tightened as she realized just how far her daughter had come and how much Marcus had shaped her family's destiny. For decades, Jalira had ruled with an iron fist. She had believed that strength meant control, perfection, and fear, yet now she understood that she had been wrong. True strength was not in rigid rules or flawless skill. It was in courage, loyalty, and love. Marcus, a human she had once dismissed as fragile, had shown her that even the smallest, most underestimated beings could shape the future of worlds. The queen rose and walked to the balcony, where Lyra and Marcus stood side by side, watching the children play under the twin moons. The sight was simple, yet it struck Jalira deeply. Her daughter, once timid and unsure, now radiated confidence. Her son-in-law, once awkward and frail, now exuded quiet power. Together, they had built a family, a legacy, and an empire stronger than any army or weapon could achieve. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered into the night, "I regret doubting them, but I am grateful that I have lived to see this." The regret she had carried for so long had transformed into awe and humility. She realized that sometimes mistakes teach more than victories, and unexpected alliances can create unimaginable strength. Lyra turned to Marcus and smiled, a small gesture of shared understanding. "We did it, Marcus. We survived. We thrived." Marcus wrapped his arm around her shoulders, his eyes reflecting the light of the twin moons. "Not just survived," he said softly. "We built something lasting, together." Jalira knew then that her empire's future was no longer her burden alone. The lessons Marcus had brought, the human spirit of resilience, empathy, and perseverance, had reshaped her daughter, her family, and the empire itself. She felt pride, yes, but it was different from the pride of a ruler who demanded obedience. This was pride born from love, respect, and understanding. The twins ran toward the balcony, their laughter ringing through the palace gardens. They called to their grandparents and parents, eager to show a new strategy they had devised. Lyra knelt to their level. Marcus crouched beside her, and Jalira watched silently, a smile touching her lips. She saw in their eyes the future she had once feared she could not secure, a future of courage, hope, and unity. For the first time, Jalira realized that weakness and failure were not what she had feared. True weakness was in refusing to see potential, in denying courage where it quietly grew. Marcus, Lyra, and their children had proven that strength often came from unexpected places, and that sometimes the most fragile beings could change the course of entire empires. Jalira finally spoke aloud, her voice steady and full of emotion. "I was wrong. About everything. About Marcus. About Lyra. About what it takes to be strong. And yet I am proud of what they have become, proud of what they have built, and grateful to have witnessed it." Lyra and Marcus looked at her, understanding in their eyes. The queen had finally embraced the truth. Love, trust, and perseverance were more powerful than fear, pride or rigid strength. The empire would continue not because of domination, but because of the family that had forged it with courage and heart. And as the twin moons cast their gentle light across the palace gardens, Queen Jalira smiled, knowing that the legacy of her daughter, her son-in-law, and their children would shine brighter than any star in the galaxy. The Cathari Empire was safe. The family was strong, and humans, unexpected, fragile, resilient humans, had proven that greatness could come in forms no one had ever imagined. The Queen's heart was finally at peace,